Hey everyone, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today we have something interesting for you. We are going to show you how to create an extended menu with icons using HTML and CSS. So let's get started. Here we have a div element with the class container. Next we have a UL tag that defines an unordered list. Here we have a list item within the unordered list. It includes inline CSS style using the style attribute. It set custom CSS variable I and j so that it can specify color values. Next we have a span element with the class icon. Here we have script tag at the end of our HTML document that is used to load the Iconicon library for displaying the icon on the web page. There are two script tags, one for modern browser with the type module attribute and another for old browser with no module. Next we have a here home icon from the Iconicon library. Here we have another span element with the class text. Inside the text, here we have a home text. Next we have a call icon. Everything is same, only the color and the icon is changed. Next we have a chatbot icon, chatbox icon. Next we have a contact icon. And at the last we have our setting icon. So that's our HTML part. Now let's add CSS. Here we have a universal selector. We set the box sizing to border box, font family to sans serif, margin and padding to 0. So they remove the default margin and the padding. Now let's target element with the class container. Here align item is set to center, display is set to flex, Justify content is set to center. Mean height is set to 100 VH. And width is set to 100%. So that ensure that the span entire width of the parent element. Now let's tell the UL. Here display is set to flex, gap is set to 25 pixel, and position is set to relative. Now let's tell the list item. Here align item is set to center, justify content is set to center, background is set to white, border radius is set to 60 pixel, so they create a rounded corner for each list item. Cursor is set to pointer, height is set to 60 pixel, so they create a square shape. Next we set a box shadow to each list item, giving it a shadow effect. The shadow has a blur radius of 25 pixel and is slightly offset vertically 10 pixel from the element. List style is set to none, position is set to relative, and transition is set to 0.5 seconds. So they add a smooth transition effect over 0.5 seconds. And the width is set to 60 pixels. Now let's set hover effect. Here we set a box shadow. When a list item is hovered, and the width is set to 180 pixel, so that it increases the width of the list item when it is hovered over. Now let's set shadow element. Here background is set to linear gradient color. The gradient start at var I and ends at var j for dynamic coloring. Next, border radius is set to 60 pixel, so they add a border radius making it circular. Content is set to an empty string. Inset is set to 0. Opacity is set to 0. Position is set to absolute. And here we add a transition effect of 0.5 seconds. So they smoothly animate. Now let's target the before shadow element of list item. Here opacity is set to 1, so that make it visible. Now let's set after shadow element. Here we apply a background to linear gradient color. Content is set to an empty string similar to the before shadow element. So they generate an empty content box. And filter is set to blur 15 pixel. Height is set to 100%. Opacity is set to 0. So that completely make it transparent. Position is set to absolute. Top is set to 10 pixel. Transition is set to 0.5 second, so they add smoothly transition effect. Width is set to 100%. Z index is set to -1. So they behind the list item content to Z index 1. Now let's target the after shadow element of list item. Here opacity is set to 0.5 so that partially visible by changing its opacity. Now let's target the ion icon element with the list item. Here we set a color to a grayish color. Font size is set to 1.75 rem so that make the font larger, and the transition here we set is 0.5 second. Now let's set hover effect. Here color is set to white. Transform is set to scale 0 so that make it disappear when the list item is hovered. Transition delay is set to 0 so that it ensures that the icon transformation happens immediately on hover. Now let's set span element. Here position is set to absolute, which allow you to precisely position them within the list item. Now let's target the span element with the class text. Here color is set to white. Font size is set to 1.25 rem so that make it slightly larger. Letter spacing is set to 0.1 rem so they add a small letter spacing to the text. Text transform is set to uppercase. Transform is set to scale 0 so that make it invisible. Transition delay is set to 0 second and transition is set to 0.5 second. Now let's target the span element with the class text when the list item is hovered. Here transform is set to scale 1 so that when the list item is hovered over, and transition 0 delay is set to 0.25 seconds. So that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video and found it informative, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to our channel for more web development tutorials.